911, where's your emergency?
I'd like to see if I could get an officer to do a welfare check on my mother. No one we know of has heard from her in quite some time.
It just drew a lot of alarm bells for everybody.
The next steps to take is to obtain that surveillance footage.
It is suspicious. What are they doing with this money?
I was almost in disbelief. It was hard for me to realize that somebody could do this to another human being.
It felt like I couldn't breathe.
That's factor time. Did you kill her?
71-year-old Cindy Mudd is exchanging presents with her family at Christmas.
Thank you, Haley.
She gave the biggest bear hugs that you could possibly imagine. She was the perfect grandma in my eyes. I feel like she was made to be a grandma. When we did celebrate Christmas, it was a wonderful day. Nan was a virologist. She loved what she did, and she was pretty miraculous. I loved her for it. My mother was a single mother, and she worked really, really hard to provide for me. She did a great job.
Cindy's loyal dog, Dusty, isn't left out.
Dogs were always part of her life, but she was a dog lover. I can guarantee that dog was at her side at all times, just like every other pet we've ever had.
Oh, look what we got here. Look at that. That's
Dan started to show signs of dementia and early Alzheimer's. The last half a dozen times that I saw my mom, each time I saw her, there was a definite decline in her mental status. But my mom was funny and strong and kind. You just never think that something like this is going to happen to your family.
Communications. My name is Jessica Bean, and I'd like to see if I could get an officer to do a welfare check on my mother.
On August 18th, we received a call from an individual who was concerned about Cynthia Mudd, who lived in our Cross Lanes area of Kanawha County.
I've been coming by the house every day for like the last week, and no one's answering. No one we know of has heard from her in quite some time.
I had started going down there every day, just pounding on the door.
The only contact we've had has been with this house guest, and he said, oh, she went away on vacation. My mother doesn't have the means to take a vacation. She doesn't have a car, she doesn't have the money. We don't know what's going on. No one's answering.
Is the house guest still there?
The house guest isn't answering the door if he is.
If they haven't been in contact, it could indicate that there's a very serious problem, and we need to find out as quickly as possible the condition of the individual.
All right, Jessica, I'll get somebody over there to check on her.
Dispatch sends Corporal A.J. Miller to Cindy's house.
I noticed that the house was in really good shape. The yard was mowed.
Sheriff's office.
I knocked on the residence for over 15 minutes trying to make contact. I could hear a dog barking inside the home. Unless we see somebody that is in need of our assistance, can't open doors that we're not invited inside of. We generally try and look in the windows to make sure that somebody hasn't fallen, but they all had curtains and blinds on them, so I was unable to see inside the residence. I hit the siren to try and get her attention. Still no contact.
Cindy's daughter, Jessica, arrives at her mother's home to speak with Corporal Miller.
I remember meeting Jessica. She could tell me the specifics of her mother's living arrangement with a man that she's had living there.
So who was the person that was living with your mom?
His name is Sam May.
She wanted a partner. She wanted a soulmate. She wanted someone to be with her, like a companion. But my mother's relationship with Sam May felt like something that you would see on
Jerry Springer. Sam and my mother were a couple, but he had gotten another female pregnant, Michelle, and moved her into the house. And my mom was taking care of Sam and his girlfriend.
Michelle had resided in the home up until about a year ago.
Do you have Sam's cell number?
I tried calling it over and over this week. It rang once, then nothing.
His telephone was out of service, so you couldn't leave a message. In a missing person complaint, it's imperative to canvass the area to find out when somebody had last seen Mrs. Mudd. The sooner we get that information, the better.
Deputies speak with Cindy's neighbors.
We had run into her neighbor, Lorna.
Excuse me, ma'am. I'm with the sheriff's office. Do you know your neighbor, Cindy Mudd?
Yes, but I've not seen her, not for a while.
It had been at least 3 weeks since she had seen her. Lorna made mention that she had recognized a younger female enter through a window of the residence. When we hear about somebody going through a window, it does create suspicion.
Lorna says the woman she saw enter the house is Sam's ex-girlfriend, Michelle.
They definitely need to be questioned by law enforcement in regard to why they're doing it, what's going on. It's imperative that we make contact with anybody that has had firsthand knowledge of her whereabouts, especially somebody that resides with her.
Who else has been living there?
2 guys, Sam and Arnold.
Who is Arnold?
Sam and Arnold were very good friends. Arnold would be just as important to speak to because if anything had happened, he may very well have either heard or seen something that would be beneficial to our investigation.
Lorna had explained that Arnold worked at a gas station about 1.5 miles from her home. I made contact with the manager of the gas station.
Excuse me, ma'am. I'm with the sheriff's office. I'm looking for one of your employees, Arnold Hiller.
I was advised that he was let go.
You got his cell number?
Arnold's telephone was out of service, so you couldn't leave a message. It's kind of a roadblock.
Kanawha County Sheriff's Office opens a missing persons investigation to find Cindy Mudd. Detective Elford leads the team.
Once all efforts are exhausted in locating her, we put her into NCIC as a missing person. You just gotta go to your next piece of key evidence to hopefully locate her.
Investigators access Cindy's bank records to look for clues that might explain her disappearance.
We got Cindy's banking transactions. Come and have a look.
In looking at the transaction history, I noticed that there had been some ATM withdrawals and a lot of activity on July 20th, 21st, 22nd, and July 26th from a Speedway gas station, which is in very close proximity to Cynthia's residence.
That's a total of $832.94. That's a lot of money.
Those 4 transactions, they were back to back. And from looking at her banking history, it's something out of the ordinary.
Let's check it out.
Going down to that gas station, we want to obtain that surveillance footage.
Show me the footage from the camera on the ATM.
We viewed the footage on July 26th, right at the time of the exact transaction. Our hopes is to see who exactly is using that debit card.
Who's that?
I immediately recognized that person using Cindy's card as Samuel May.
I don't see Cindy. Show me the exterior camera.
We may be looking for Cindy as well, see if she may be waiting for him out in the parking lot. But we see nobody on the footage other than him.
Cynthia had some health issues, so it sounded as if he had become like a caretaker for Cynthia. It wouldn't be unusual for Sam to have Cynthia's card to buy groceries or other necessities for Cynthia.
Cindy's card was used at the same ATM 3 more times.
Let's watch the footage from the dates of the other transactions.
On July 20th and July 21st, I saw that it was Samuel May again, and he arrived at the store on foot. He made the cash withdrawal.
He withdraws $403.50 on both of those days. It was very suspicious.
And he headed back in the same direction as Cynthia Mudd's residence.
No Cindy.
Can you play the footage from July 22nd?
What was interesting about July 22nd was not only was Samuel May the one that used the card at the ATM, but he was also accompanied by another white male. He's wearing a ball cap, shorts, and a maroon colored t-shirt. It was clear that the two men were together. They were communicating. They purchased some snacks together. The male this was Sam on the surveillance video. He had eyeglasses. He is noticeably shorter and stockier. He's got facial hair. That man with Sam was Arnold Hiller, the friend of Samuel's who lived in the home with them.
Show me the outside camera.
They exit the store together, and then they walk back into the direction of Cindy's house.
Seeing that Sam and Arnold had consistently withdrawn money, it is suspicious. What need did they have for this immediate cash in such large amounts? What are they doing with this money?
They're just getting out as much money as the ATM will allow them. The last time Sam and Arnold were seen were just a few days prior. So in our minds, we have to locate them as quick as possible.
Thank you. We're gonna need a copy of the footage here. Thanks.
Cindy's daughter, Jessica, calls Detective Alford with information she learned from Sam's ex, Michelle.
Detective Alford speaking. Hi, Jessica. How can I help you?
I learned from Jessica that her and Michelle had been in contact with each other.
She said that the last time she saw my mother, Cindy, was a month ago. Michelle said she broke into the house, she climbed in through a window, and she said no one's there, so she thinks that he has fled.
Jessica had given her permission to do that to see if she could maybe locate Cindy.
She told me that she had gone to the house because she hadn't heard anything from my mom, and she too was concerned for my mother.
It was Michelle who neighbor Lorna saw climb through Cindy's window. Investigators charge her with no crimes for entering Cindy's home.
It was obviously very important that we find and speak to Michelle. We met Michelle outside of her place of employment. We interviewed her just in our vehicle outside of the Dollar Tree. We asked Michelle about going over to Cynthia's house. She'd been unable to reach Samuel or Arnold by phone, and so she decided to go over to check on them all.
I actually let myself into the house, and I actually went through the window. I expected to find Sam passed out in bed. I was quite shocked to find the house empty. In Cindy's room, there's pillows missing off of her bed, which is weird because she likes pillows.
if she didn't see any signs of a disturbance. What happened to Cynthia?
So what's your gut telling you? My gut's telling me that something bad happened to Cindy.
Michelle reveals that she broke up with Sam a week earlier.
He's been a little agitated. He's been distant, major mood swings. He'll be okay one minute and the next minute he's angry at everyone. Drunk, he's capable of anything.
If Sam wasn't at Salted Drive, do you have any idea where he'd be at?
I don't, honestly.
Michelle explained that because she shares a child with Samuel. She and Samuel have a tracking app called Life 360. This was very exciting because that could obviously give us GPS locations. And that just basically shows when it went off in his last location? Or...
Yeah, it shows the last time that he was out of the house. That was Tuesday night, and then he went home. Wednesday morning is when Sam turned his phone off. So that was the last time I know of him being at that location. It's still off. It still says off since 9:44 Wednesday.
Sam turns his tracking app off on August 17th. That's 2 days before Cindy was reported missing. It raises a red flag. Why would he stop sharing his location? 2 days, that's a lot of time. And with the amount of money they were retrieving from the ATM, I'm sure they could pay someone or maybe take a bus and get out of state. So we have to locate him as quick as possible.
Back at the sheriff's office, investigators reanalyze Cindy's banking activity.
At this point in the investigation, the transaction history using Cynthia's card was the only way we had of tracking anybody.
There's new transactions on Cindy's card. 2 days ago.
We found a transaction on August 17th, the day Sam's Life 360 was turned off. And that was at the Family Dollar in the amount of approximately $71. We had seen who was using the card in July, but we wanted some video surveillance that would show us who in particular is using it in August.
Can we see the footage from August 17th?
We learned that the Family Dollar does have surveillance cameras, and they provided footage of the transaction from August 17th.
Yeah, play from there.
From the camera that's facing the doors, I'm hoping to see who's using Cynthia Mudd's card.
Stop there.
At 6:07 p.m., exiting the store, we see two white males, one in a camouflage hat and a blue shirt with a gray backpack, and we see another male in a white sleeveless shirt and khaki shorts.
That's Sam and Arnold.
It was a confidence booster and let us know we're moving in the right direction.
Rewind.
We're hoping to see what they're purchasing and also when they're checking out as well.
The two don't seem like they're in hiding. They don't appear nervous. They are chatty. They're just kind of joking back and forth.
They shop around for a little while and they pay with Cindy's card. It's a big moment for us as investigators because we see them still continuing spending Cindy's money and she's still a missing person.
Across town, Cindy's family grow increasingly concerned about her whereabouts.
Hi, Detective Alford? And you heard anything yet?
And the police were keeping me informed and making themselves available to me.
Thank you. Please let me know.
Nothing yet.
At one point, it felt like a nightmare. And I was just hoping that I was wrong and that I'd been worrying for nothing. My fears were pretty dark at that point, but I was hoping it maybe She was just sick.
On the following day, after we did the welfare check, the neighbor contacted the sheriff's office about Cynthia's dog.
911, where's your emergency?
Well, I don't know if anything's going on or not, but this lady across the road, she's an elderly lady, she has a dog. Well, it's been out for days, and it's been over my porch eating cat food.
The neighbor thought that was very unusual. She also went with the dog back over to the residence.
I went to the door, to knock on the door, to check on the lady, and nobody answered. I followed the dog because it went around back, and he keeps sniffing at this big old pile of brush and stuff, and he just keeps sniffing and whining.
The dog kept going to this location in the backyard, pawing at the ground. It just drew a lot of alarm bells for everybody. Deputies went and responded to that call.
So I pulled up to the house. I then went over and spoke with the neighbor, Tanya, who was the complainant for this 911 call. I asked her to show me specifically the area of the yard that she was uncomfortable with.
Hi, boy. I'm gonna go have a look.
The dog came with me. He shadowed me over that location. Along the back fence, directly behind the house, there was what looked to be a partially covered pile of wood. I'm a canine handler. I pay a lot of attention to the dog, to how the dog is interacting with the environment. As soon as I got close to that wood pile, the dog laid down on his stomach, looked directly at the side of it, and he whimpered. His behavior completely changed. I realized that what was meant to look like a wood pile was actually a stack of other stuff. I peeled part of like a outdoor backyard pool, and I saw what I thought was the side of a chest-style freezer. It was then that it became completely obvious that I was looking at a form of camouflage. There were several screws holding the freezer door shut. That immediately set off some red flags for me. I believed that there was something in the freezer that we needed to get to.
Corporal Ratliff calls for backup.
I receive a call to get assault and drive. So I stop what I'm doing and I drive there. When I walk into the backyard, it definitely appeared like someone wanted to conceal this deep freezer from people seeing it. I think that dog was letting us know that something was wrong with that area right there. We attempt to open it. We actually use pry bars to get the screws out of the way.
There was a strong odor. I have only ever been able to associate it with death.
We locate this roll of green carpet. We lifted the carpet out of the deep freezer, and it's got nylon rope around it, like somebody had tied the carpet to make it stay together.
Carefully, they started to peel it open little by little.
We're able to see human bones coming out of that carpet and a human skull.
Based on the state of decomposition, this body has obviously been in the freezer much longer than a day.
We believe that the body in the deep freezer is Cynthia Mudd. It was almost like in disbelief, you know. It was hard for me to realize that somebody could do this to another human being.
The medical examiner's office was able to determine that it in fact was Cynthia Mudd.
The autopsy revealed that Cynthia had a fractured rib and a fractured sternum. That information told me that either Cynthia had a very severe accident, whether that be a fall or someone else has caused those injuries.
Due to her being decayed so much, they estimated that she was deceased for at least a month.
Investigators informed Jessica of her mother's death.
My husband and I were on the front porch. The officer started walking up the steps, and I said it before she could say anything at all.
No. No. No, Mom.
I said, she's dead. And she was.
They didn't tell me exactly how she died. They just told me that they found out that Nan was dead. It felt like I couldn't breathe. I kind of wished it was wrong, and that something so heinous could never happen to someone so special to me.
Investigators secure a warrant to search the home Cindy shared with Sam and Arnold.
We were able to enter the house and start doing an investigation and collecting evidence and possibly see if the crime happened inside the house. When I'm walking through the residence, I'm looking for blood stains, places that, she could have been injured, weapons, anything to tie what happened to her in the deep freezer in that house. We noticed that there was a hole in the wall, which could have been made from physical force or maybe a blunt object. But there was nothing jumping out at us saying that a crime happened inside the house. As we made our way out to the garage area, we located the white nylon rope.
That rope seemed similar to the white rope that was used to wrap around the carpet that was surrounding the body in the freezer.
Whoever did this to Cindy has access to the home and the garage area.
We're really confident that Sam and Arnold most likely had some involvement in her death. Finding Sam and Arnold is very crucial.
Detectives analyzed the latest transactions on Cindy's debit card to try to pinpoint their location.
On August 17th, there was another transaction in Charleston, West Virginia, an ATM withdrawal for $400 cash. That's quite a large amount, and it prompts us to wonder, is the money being used to, pay to stay somewhere? It shifted our focus to at least the Charleston area.
I see Cindy's card was attempted to be used at a motel, the Quality Inn. My mind goes to, they gotta have somewhere to lay their heads. My adrenaline's pumping because I want to talk to these guys. I want to figure out what happened to Cindy.
Detectives head to the Quality Inn motel.
We're from the Kanawha County Sheriff's Office. Have you seen these two men?
So we showed that clerk some photos, and they remember those two guys, Sam and Arnold.
When'd they check in?
It was confirmed that Samuel May and Arnold Hiller checked in to the motel on August 17th. It's the day before Cynthia Mudd was reported missing.
And that was the day that Sam had turned his location off with Michelle. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that they're hiding.
Are they still staying here?
We learned that Sam and Arnold had checked out of the motel on August 22nd. And this date was interesting because the media had just released that Cynthia's body had been recovered. Sam and Arnold probably got the feeling that the cards were getting ready to fall. They realized they needed to make a move.
It was kind of defeating a little bit, but we had another great piece of evidence. We had the surveillance footage from the hotel.
Okay, play it from there.
The lobby camera provided footage that showed Sam and Arnold checking into that motel on August 17th at 4:29 p.m.
And it appears that Arnold gives his ID for the room and that Sam pays for the room.
In the lobby, their behavior is somewhat unbelievable because something very bad has happened to Cindy. And here's the two people closest to her that probably know what's happened. Yet here they are being seen just kind of casually joking, nonchalant in a motel lobby.
Can you place the footage from the camera in their hallway?
We got really lucky on that particular camera placement, and we got really good views of Sam and Arnold.
They appear to leave the room August 22nd at 9:33 a.m. Sam exits the room wearing a backpack, and shortly after Arnold exits the room, he also has his backpack with him. They walk out of the hotel at that point. Seeing that surveillance footage from the hotel, it's unable to really help us on where they were going. I don't know what happened to them at this point. It's very urgent to locate these two now because obviously they know law enforcement is actively looking for them, what's, going through their heads.
Detective Alford speaking.
So on the morning of August 23rd, I received a phone call that Charleston Police Department has Samuel May. We learned he had actually jumped in the river on the 22nd. I don't know if he was just using the river to try to maybe float and travel as far as he could to the next city, but some people had saw him, called 911, so he was in the hospital overnight. That moment I got that phone call about Samuel May, I'm excited. I want to be in the interview room with him.
Investigators bring Samuel May back to the sheriff's office for questioning.
We're just here to figure out what happened. You saw the news, you said, so obviously that's what we want to talk to you about. So just start at the beginning.
And I'm not one to lie.
And Detective Morgan had just come out and just flat out asked him.
Let's start from the top. Say, did you kill her? Did you kill her?
Cindy?
Yeah.
I did.
When he heard that, we were kind of taken aback from it. Wow, he's ready to talk. He's ready to tell us what really happened.
Arnold and I went out and took the little bar down the road, which I really shouldn't drink, obviously, because I black out. And it's horrifying.
They had gotten drunk and they walked home.
But it was late, and I went straight to bed. And when I got up, Arnold was trying to get me to help her and all that. And you could tell there had been some damage. And
what kind of damage, Sam?
Some face punches, stuff.
Okay.
I don't.
She went over
exactly.
Were those punches from you? And when you blacked out, that likely?
More than likely.
He's just yeah, I blacked out. I woke up and she was hurt really bad. It seemed almost like he didn't really care as much.
Just names?
Yeah, I just know. I woke up. I don't even remember getting mad. That's the problem.
I don't believe you blacked out. I believe you knew what happened. He's admitting a little bit, but he doesn't want to go into all that detail because he knows what he did was really horrible. He said that he has assaulted Cindy before, and he's been involved in a few other domestics. We asked him why he hadn't called the hospital whenever Cindy was hurt.
I freaked out. It was all weird, both crazy freaks. We instead of calling the hospital.
It blows my mind that neither one of them called 911.
It didn't matter. I knew, but she quit breathing on the bed over one of the nights.
We found out that Cindy's death wasn't immediate. It took a few days.
When we checked on her, stuff like that. I was so freaked out I couldn't even, it's a big fear.
He was thinking about himself and not her. He said that after she had passed away, they decided to take her and roll her up in the carpet, in the deep freezer. He kind of went about his normal day.
Sam is charged with the murder of Cindy Mudd, as well as the concealment of her body.
Sam didn't admit to remembering what he did, so we were hoping to ascertain that information from Arnold. So we had put out still images asking for the public's help in locating Arnold. Approximately 2 weeks later, Arnold is located in Beckley and arrested.
We charged Arnold with fraudulent use of someone's debit or credit card. He's placed in a regional jail. We were able to come to an agreement for an interview with Arnold. He tells us that Sam basically steps on her head 4 or 5 times. And when I say step, I mean with force. The deep freezer idea was Sam's idea, and Arnold did assist with disposing of her body. In January of 2023, Arnold Hiller pleads guilty to concealment and disposal of a body.
The fraud charges against Arnold are dropped as part of his guilty plea.
Arnold was sentenced to 1 to 5 years. In August of 2023, Samuel May pled guilty to second-degree murder, and he was handed a sentence of 40 years in a penitentiary maximum.
As part of the plea deal, prosecutors dropped all other charges against Sam. Investigators pieced together the events that led to Cindy's death.
The investigation revealed that Sam had a tendency to be violent. There was reported incidents involving him and Cynthia.
Michelle and Jessica had both said that he's very abusive towards women. One night in early July, Sam and Arnold go out to a bar and drink. When they got back from the bar, Cindy was up in the living room.
According to Sam, he blacked out and doesn't recall exactly what happened. But I would say he was in a fit of rage. He hit, most likely kicked Cynthia, causing a fractured rib and a fractured sternum.
The following day, he realized that he messed up and he needed help, and he knew Arnold would help him. They keep her alive for about 3 days.
They gave her water, trying to sustain her until she eventually died. And then the two of them conspired to hide her body by wrapping it in carpet. And then they put that carpet with Cynthia's body inside of a deep freezer. And took the freezer out to the backyard where they concealed it with a tarp and stacked other objects up around it. When Sam and Arnold were using her debit card at the Speedway in mid-July, they were using it after her death. When they realized that family reported her missing is when they decided to leave the house.
On August 17th, Sam takes off the Life 360 tracking app, and they make it to the Quality Inn. Well, I think it just shows that both of them are very selfish, and, you know, they didn't want to get in trouble for what had happened, whereas, you know, if they had called 911 when she was alive, you know, that there's a chance that they could have saved Cindy's life. I don't think there's really a big motive for Sam. I think he's just such an aggressive, like, just a bad person and thought he could get away with it. Cindy's kindness was definitely abused by Sam and Arnold.
CCTV was very helpful in this investigation, actually critical. Some good timelines to him.
The surveillance footage in this case was a very big part. I think it would have took a lot longer to resolve if we didn't have the surveillance footage.
It hurts. And there's always that, what? Maybe if I had just been forceful and, you know, gone in there and just taken her out, that she would finally leave him. And that just never happened. There's a lot of guilt involved. I miss her laugh. I miss the way that she hugs. I don't know where the world goes without Nan. I don't know where it's supposed to go without Nan. She's my mom. Person who loved me and taught me lessons and helped me when I needed her. If I could say anything to my mom today, I would want her to know how much she's loved and missed.
Next time on See No Evil.
911 emergency.
This was an intentionally set fire.
My son told me, no, Mom, he's been murdered.
What I never could have expected is video of them doing it. I mean, you can't even hope for something like that.
The air was thick with salt and secrets that summer in 1994, when the sun burned the California coast into a sepia haze and one woman's disappearance began a mystery that would linger for decades. Her name was Lauren Pierce, a 27-year-old journalist last seen leaving a cafe on Ocean Avenue just before dusk. She was supposed to meet someone, no one knew who. The waitress remembered her half-empty cup of coffee, the folded notepad left on the table, and a man watching her from the parking lot. When police found her car 2 days later, abandoned near the cliffs of Monterey, the driver's door ajar, the keys still dangling from the ignition, it felt less like a missing person case and more like a message. Lauren was gone. The scene told its own quiet story. Tire marks etched into gravel, a broken chain from a silver bracelet, and sand pressed down by what looked like 2 sets of footprints, one leading toward the edge, the other returning alone. From the start, nothing about it made sense. Detectives combed the coastline for days, but the Pacific swallowed everything. No body, no clothes, no trace. The headlines screamed, "Journalist vanishes from Cliffside Road. Cold case mystery begins." The community buzzed with theories. Suicide, abduction, an accident that went too far. But something darker whispered beneath those speculations, a sense that whoever had been waiting for Lauren that night had planned it, rehearsed it, and left no room for mistakes. Years passed, and the ocean kept its silence. The case file gathered dust inside a locked cabinet at the Santa Cruz Police Department. Every so often, a rookie detective would pull it out, read the statements, and shake their head at the futility of chasing ghosts. The photos inside were frozen in time. Lauren's smiling face, the empty parking lot, the blurred shot of the shadowy figure near the cafe entrance. But in 1994, DNA analysis was in its infancy. Evidence that might have spoken was muted by the limitations of its era. The world moved on. Families changed houses, detectives retired, and new crimes claimed the city's attention. Still, for Lauren's mother, every wave that crashed against those cliffs sounded like her daughter's voice calling home. Then, 30 years later, in 2024, something shifted. A warehouse fire in Sacramento led investigators to re-examine archived evidence, and among the old boxes damaged by smoke was one marked with fading ink, Pierce, L, 940711. Inside, sealed in a brittle plastic bag, were fragments of the broken bracelet and a tiny fiber sample collected from Lauren's car seat. Routine cataloging turned into revelation when a technician ran the fiber through a new DNA matching algorithm linked to the state's genealogical database. The result didn't match any known offender, it matched a relative, a retired officer living quietly near Palm Springs, Detective Raymond Cole. For those who still remembered the case, the name landed like an earthquake. Cole had been part of the original investigation. A respected officer, mentor, the man who had signed off on the final report declaring Lauren Pierce missing, presumed dead. Now, the machine was saying his bloodline tied him to her car. Detectives reopened the file in silence, wary of leaks, knowing one wrong move could destroy everything. They tracked Cole's family records, cross-checked his DNA from medical archives, and found a near-perfect match. But arresting a former cop wasn't simple. He was careful, private, unshakable. The kind of man who'd spent a lifetime studying how criminals slip through cracks. The kind of man who might have built his own escape plan years in advance. Investigators shadowed him for weeks. Photographs from grocery store parking lots, his quiet morning walks, his habits. Every detail documented, every motion analyzed. The man lived alone. No wife, no children, no visitors. A ghost in broad daylight. The more they watched, the more they realized something eerie. Cole knew he was being watched. He adjusted his routes, left subtle signals like he was playing a game of chess he'd already won, until one night a surveillance drone caught him in his backyard, burning a box. Inside, they later found melted metal and glass, among the remnants a half-buried police badge warped by fire. Serial number 23337, the same badge Cole had reported missing in 1995. When they brought him in, the retired detective sat in the interrogation room without a lawyer, staring at the blank wall as if he'd been waiting for this moment. "You think you've solved it," he said quietly, "but you don't even know what it is." The lead investigator, a young woman named Sofia Navarro, watched him with steady eyes. "Then tell me," she said. Cole smiled, a slow, tired smile that made the air feel colder. "Lauren wanted a story," he whispered. "She got one." His words hung in the air, a riddle and a confession wrapped into one. Navarro leaned forward, her voice low. "You killed her?" Cole didn't answer. Instead, he closed his eyes and said, "You'll find what's left of her where the tide turns red." The line sounded poetic, almost rehearsed, but it sent every agent in the room racing toward the coast. That night, under the glow of red signal lights and the roar of the Pacific, search teams combed the rocky shoreline near Point Lobos. They found nothing, no body, no bones. But in a hollow crevice at low tide, they uncovered something small and haunting, a rusted key attached to a chain, engraved with the letters LP. It was the key to a safety deposit box at a bank that had closed in 2002. The vault had been sealed ever since. When authorities broke it open, inside was a tape. An old cassette labeled Interview 07-11-94, the date of Lauren's disappearance. The recording, once restored, revealed a conversation between Lauren Pierce and a man whose voice they identified as Cole's. It began like an interview, calm, professional, but slowly turned uneasy. Lauren asked about corruption, about police cover-ups, about unsolved murders linked to missing evidence. Cole's tone shifted from friendly to defensive, then to something colder. The final minute was silence, broken only by the sound of wind and a car door closing. After that, nothing. The tape ended, but its echo didn't. Cole refused to explain. He said only that the truth isn't what you think it is. The headlines exploded. California 1994 cold case solved. Former detective finally caught. The public saw it as closure. Justice delayed but delivered. Yet inside the department, whispers persisted, because even after Cole's arrest, no one ever found Lauren's body. No trace, no remains, no proof of death. And in his cell, Cole wrote a single note on the wall with chalk smuggled from the workshop. "She's still out there." When guards asked what he meant, he only smiled again, that same weary smile, and said, "Maybe you should stop looking for the victim." Outside, the waves kept breaking against the cliffs, carrying secrets that refused to drown. And somewhere between memory and myth, the story of Lauren Pierce remained unfinished, the kind that keeps detectives awake at night, wondering if the ocean really took her, or if someone else did. They reopened the case file completely, stripping every layer of what had once been considered resolved, and what emerged beneath the yellowed papers was rot, the kind that had been festering under years of silence. Detective Sofia Navarro sat in the evidence room long after everyone left, the sound of the fluorescent lights humming above her like a restless insect. The tape still haunted her, that breath, that car door, that faint mechanical click at the very end. She played it again and again, isolating sounds, slowing them, amplifying background noise. There was something buried under the wind, a brief metallic echo that didn't belong. Forensic analysts later confirmed it, the faint sound of a police radio dispatch from the same precinct Cole had served in 1994. That meant he hadn't been home that night as he'd claimed. He had been on duty, or at least using a department car. It was the first crack in the wall he'd built around himself. But Cole's expression never changed. Every time Navarro questioned him, he answered with calm precision, as if reading from a manual on how to withstand interrogation. "The truth," he said, "is the only thing everyone edits." When they pressed him for details, he simply pointed at the ceiling, muttering, "Listen to what's missing, not to what's there." It was infuriating. Yet there was a rhythm to his cryptic speech, one that seemed to follow the same cadence as the tape. Navarro began to suspect he wasn't hiding from them. He was guiding them. The lab re-examined the bracelet fragments under spectral light and found microscopic traces of red paint consistent with the primer used in 1990s police vehicles. That single discovery turned the case from cold to combustible. If Lauren had been in a patrol car, and if Cole had been driving, then the disappearance wasn't random, it was internal. Navarro went digging through departmental archives, chasing names, shift logs, assignment records. Most were incomplete, others mysteriously missing. Then she found something that chilled her, a confidential memo dated 3 weeks before Lauren vanished, marked with Cole's signature. It authorized the closure of an internal corruption investigation tied to seized narcotics that had gone missing from the evidence locker. Lauren Pierce had been writing a piece about that very case. Her last article draft, retrieved from her typewriter ribbon, contained 3 words typed and retyped over a smudge of ink. Trust no one. By the time Navarro pieced it together, she was no longer certain if she was investigating a murder or a cover-up that had swallowed both hunter and prey. Cole's retirement records showed no anomalies, no complaints, not even a disciplinary note. He'd left the force quietly, received a commendation, and disappeared into the desert. But financial forensics told a different story. Deposits in cash, irregular, all within months of the cold case's closure. When Navarro confronted him with the records, he didn't deny them. He just said, "Back then, justice had a price tag. Some of us just learned the currency." The words hung heavy in the sterile air. He looked at her, almost kindly, and asked, "Do you really want to know what happened to her?" Navarro hesitated. "Yes." "Then dig where the ground burns." She didn't sleep that night. Those words echoed until dawn. Where the ground burns. In coastal slang, that meant one place. A stretch of scorched land near an abandoned cannery outside Moss Landing, where wildfires had devoured acres of industrial waste over the years. The site had been used for police training in the late 90s. Navarro requested permission to excavate, but the local department refused, citing environmental hazard. She went anyway. At sunrise, the ground still smoked faintly from a recent brush fire. The soil was black, brittle, and smelled of salt and ash. She and 2 forensic techs began digging by hand, scraping past layers of soot until they struck something hard. A slab of concrete, fractured and uneven. Beneath it, sealed in a rusted metal drum, were remnants of what looked like burnt fabric, melted plastic, and a single bone fragment too charred to identify. But inside that same drum was something stranger, a small cassette recorder, half melted, still containing tape. They brought it back to the lab. It took a week to restore the audio, and when it finally played, everyone in the room went silent. It wasn't Lauren's voice. It was Cole's. The tape was dated July 13th, 1994, 2 days after her disappearance. His tone was weary, resigned. "She wanted the truth," he said. "She found it. But truth isn't clean. It stains everyone who touches it." There was a pause, then muffled sobbing, a woman's voice, distant, terrified. "Please," she whispered. "I didn't mean—" The recording cut off in a burst of static. That moment changed everything. The evidence pointed not to a premeditated killing, but to something messier, more human. A confrontation gone wrong. Panic. Cover-up. Cole's team back then had been under investigation for falsifying reports and pocketing cash from drug seizures. If Lauren had discovered proof, she'd become a liability. Still, the confession was incomplete. There was no direct admission, no clear act, only guilt threaded through silence. Navarro's superiors wanted to close the case, claim victory, announce the final headline, but something didn't add up. The bone fragment didn't match Lauren's DNA. It belonged to another woman, one who had disappeared in 1992, 2 years before Lauren. Her name was Angela Ruiz, a police informant whose file had also been signed off by Cole. 2 victims, 2 vanishings, same signature. Navarro confronted Cole again, and for the first time, his composure cracked. He looked at her like a man staring into the mirror of his own crimes. "You think I buried them?" he asked. "No, I buried myself." He leaned forward. "She's alive." The words hit her like a blow. "Lauren?" He nodded slowly. "She wanted out. She wanted me to make her disappear." Navarro didn't believe him, but his eyes were steady, unblinking, almost peaceful. "You're lying," she said. "Maybe," he whispered. "But maybe you're afraid I'm not." Days later, a coastal fisherman near Big Sur reported something odd, a leather-bound notebook washed up inside a waterproof bag. The initials on the cover, LP. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, dated 1995 to 1998. The handwriting matched Lauren Pierce. Each entry described new towns, new names, and a recurring fear of being followed. The last page ended with a single sentence. "If they ever find this, tell them he kept his promise." The lab confirmed the ink's age, authentic, real. Navarro sat alone with that notebook for hours, feeling the ground beneath everything she knew start to crumble. If Lauren had survived, then who had Cole protected, and why had he confessed? Outside, the press called it justice. Inside, Navarro knew it was something else, a puzzle that refused to close, a wound that refused to heal. She stared at the map on her wall, tracing the coastline with her finger. Somewhere between truth and invention, Lauren Pierce had become both victim and ghost. The investigation wasn't over. It was just beginning to bleed again. The notebook changed everything. It was more than evidence. It was a confession of another kind, a voice preserved in ink, whispering through time. Navarro couldn't let it go. Each word felt like a breadcrumb dropped across California's forgotten highways, and every page carried Lauren's pulse, her terror, her need to vanish. The first entry was dated 3 weeks after the disappearance. "He says I'm safe now," it began. "But the ocean still knows." Navarro read it over and over, wondering if he meant Cole or someone else. The tone was neither gratitude nor fear. It was resignation, as if Lauren had made a bargain she couldn't escape. The notebook's second half was stranger. Codes, names, locations written in shorthand only an investigative reporter would use. One page had coordinates scribbled beside a sketch of a lighthouse. Navarro cross-checked the numbers. They pointed to a remote area near Crescent City, where an old decommissioned light station sat abandoned since the late 80s. Too far, too remote, too quiet. She went anyway. The lighthouse stood crooked against the gray horizon, its paint flaking, the smell of salt thick in the air. Inside, time had stopped. Rusted lanterns, overturned furniture, a typewriter missing keys. But near the base of the spiral staircase, she found something that didn't belong. A recent footprint in dust, the tread of a modern hiking boot. Someone had been there. She climbed the stairs, flashlight trembling, until she reached the top chamber. On the wall, carved into the wood, were words that froze her. "I watched the tide turn red." The same phrase Cole had whispered in interrogation. Navarro felt her throat tighten. The wind howled through broken glass, and for a brief moment it sounded like a woman crying. Back in her car, she couldn't shake the image. A reporter hiding inside a lighthouse, writing her story in secret, while the man meant to protect her became the monster of her making. Was Lauren alive when Cole said those words? Or had he been repeating something she once wrote? Back at headquarters, forensic analysts dusted the notebook for prints. Only one matched Lauren. The others belonged to someone unknown, partial, degraded, but with a pattern that traced back to an old case file from 1996. The name attached, Detective Samuel Holt. Navarro felt her stomach drop. Holt had been Cole's partner. He'd died in a car accident in 2003. At least that's what the report said. But when Navarro requested his death file, she found only a single page. No autopsy, no photos, just a signature from Cole confirming the death. Too neat, too convenient. She started connecting the dots. Lauren investigates police corruption, disappears. Cole leads the case, declares her dead. Holt signs off on evidence, dies years later. Now both their fingerprints surface in a notebook written by a woman who shouldn't exist. It wasn't one story. It was two buried inside each other. Navarro drove to Holt's old house in Salinas, long abandoned and half collapsed. Among the debris, she found a filing cabinet scorched from fire. Most documents were unreadable, but one envelope survived, sealed in plastic. Inside were photographs, old surveillance shots of Lauren meeting with someone in a car, at night, near the docks. The man's face was obscured, but his build, his posture, even the angle of his shoulders, unmistakable. Cole. The next photo showed Lauren alone, turning toward the camera, her eyes wide, mouth half open, as if she'd just realized she was being watched. That was the last image ever taken of her. Navarro stared at it for hours. She'd seen photos of victims before, but never one that looked back. Back at the station, she confronted Cole again. He sat calmly, hands folded, the same tired stillness. She laid the photo on the table. For a long moment, he didn't blink. Then he said, almost softly, "She wasn't supposed to run." "Then why did you chase her?" "Because she found something she shouldn't have." "About you?" "About everyone." His words sent a chill through her. "You mean the department?" He leaned back. "You still think there's a department. There's just people trying to stay alive." The silence that followed felt like a confession without words. Navarro pressed on. "Was Holt involved?" Cole exhaled. "He believed we were doing the right thing until she made us question what that was. And then?" He smiled faintly. "And then she disappeared." She slammed the table. "You made her disappear." "No," he said, eyes empty. "I gave her what she wanted." "Which was?" "To be untouchable." The phrase hit her harder than any admission could. Cole wasn't lying, or if he was, he believed it. The next day, Navarro received an anonymous envelope. Inside was a USB drive. No note, The contents were chilling. Raw footage from a 1994 police camcorder showing Cole and Holt standing on a dark beach, headlights cutting through fog. Between them, a woman's silhouette, hands bound. The audio was muffled, but Lauren's voice could be heard, trembling. "You said you'd let me go." Then the screen flickered and the recording cut off. No ending, no closure, just darkness. The metadata confirmed the file had been uploaded to a cloud server less than a month ago. Someone still had the original tape, someone alive. Navarro went to Cole again, shaking the footage in front of him. "Who sent this?" she demanded. He stared at her, expression unreadable. "She did," he said. "She's telling you to stop." "Stop what?" "Digging up ghosts. They don't like the light." That night, Navarro's car alarm went off outside her apartment. The rearview mirror had been moved. On the passenger seat, she found a single Polaroid, a shot of her standing outside the lighthouse 2 days earlier, taken from a distance. On the back, a single line written in blue ink. "Not all who vanish are gone." She froze, realizing someone was watching her, someone who knew her every move. The next morning, she checked security footage from the parking lot. The cameras glitched between 2:14 and 2:17 a.m., static washing over the image. But just before the screen cut out, a shadow passed by. Tall, thin, wearing a coat that looked eerily familiar. The pattern matched one seen in the 1994 beach footage. The impossible truth began to crystallize in her mind. Maybe Cole wasn't the only one who'd survived that night. Maybe Lauren wasn't just alive. Maybe she'd become something else. Someone who knew how to disappear because she'd learned from the men who once hunted her. And now she was back, watching, waiting. Navarro's phone rang at midnight, a number she didn't recognize. She answered, and a voice whispered on the line, soft, deliberate, almost rehearsed. "Detective Navarro, stop digging." Static crackled, then a click. She stared at the receiver, heart hammering. Whoever had sent the Polaroid wasn't bluffing. She looked around her dimly lit apartment, shadows stretching long across the walls, and felt the weight of every unanswered question pressing down. She couldn't stop. Not now. The next morning, she returned to the lighthouse. The air was sharp, biting with fog rolling in from the Pacific. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of old paper felt amplified, as if the building itself were listening. She retraced her steps, searching for new clues. There, hidden under a loose panel in the spiral staircase, she found a small metal box. Inside, a stack of letters, yellowed and brittle, addressed to Lauren, but never sent. One letter, dated September 1994, revealed a side of Lauren no one had known. Her terror, her plan, her resolve. She wrote about Cole and Holt, about the men she trusted and the ones who had disappeared, and about a hidden stash of evidence she intended to release if anything happened to her. Navarro's pulse quickened. Lauren had been planning, preparing, surviving. She hadn't vanished randomly. She had vanished intentionally. The letters detailed places, dates, codes, contacts. A roadmap of a life rebuilt in the shadows. Each page deepened the mystery, revealing Lauren as both victim and architect of her own survival. Back at headquarters, Navarro pored over case files, cross-referencing the coordinates in the letters with known cold cases from the 1990s. Patterns emerged. Disappearances along the coastline, small towns, abandoned warehouses, old police stations. Each linked, tangentially, to people who had crossed paths with Cole and Holt. It wasn't just one missing woman anymore. It was a network of secrets, a web spun decades ago, reaching into the present. Navarro realized that to understand Lauren, she needed to think like her, follow her trail, anticipate her moves, and most importantly, understand why she had stayed hidden for 30 years. Late that night, she found a message scrawled on the inside of the lighthouse door, faint, almost erased. "If you want to see me, meet where the tide turns silver." Another puzzle, another coordinate, more cryptic than the last. Navarro's gut told her the tide referred to a cove near Point Reyes, a place only locals knew. She prepared for the drive, gathering surveillance gear, a camera, and a recorder. Every instinct screamed caution. Every story she'd read, every cold case she'd studied, whispered the same warning: the past can reach out and strike in the present. The drive north was tense, the fog thickening as she neared the cove. Parking her car behind a cluster of rocks, she approached on foot. The waves crashed violently against jagged stones, sending spray into the air. There, half hidden by the cliff, was a figure. Small, hunched, almost blending into the shadows. Lauren. Navarro's breath caught. She approached slowly. Lauren turned. Her eyes were sharp, unflinching, not afraid, not pleading, not desperate, alert. The years had changed her, hardened her. "Detective Navarro," Lauren said, voice calm but carrying weight. "You shouldn't have come." Navarro held up her hands. "I needed answers. I needed to understand." Lauren studied her, then nodded slightly, almost as if evaluating whether she could be trusted. 30 years, Lauren whispered. 30 years they thought they could bury me. 30 years Cole thought he controlled the story. He didn't. Her gaze shifted toward the ocean, toward the horizon where the tide glimmered silver in the moonlight. They're still watching, she said. Navarro glanced over her shoulder. The cove was empty. Yet she felt it too. The weight of eyes, distant, unseen, tracking their every movement. Lauren handed Navarro a worn envelope. Inside were photographs, documents, and a map marked with locations tied to every cold case linked to Cole and Holt. Everything, Lauren said. All of it. But it comes with a warning. Once you start telling, you can't stop. They will come for anyone who exposes them. Navarro nodded. She understood. The gravity of what she held was immense. She had the power to unravel decades of deception, corruption, and disappearance. But with it came danger, real and immediate. The wind picked up, whipping the ocean into fury, as if nature itself demanded silence. Lauren continued, I disappeared not to hide, but to survive, to watch, to know they couldn't touch me. And now it's time for the truth to move forward. Navarro listened, recording every word, understanding that this encounter was the key to decades of mystery, the solution to cases that had haunted families and detectives alike. She realized the magnitude. This wasn't just a cold case solved. This was a living, breathing web of life, death, secrecy, and survival being handed to her directly in the middle of the night on a windswept cliff. Lauren's story was real, raw, and dangerous. And Navarro's role in it was just beginning. As the first light of dawn streaked across the Pacific, Lauren faded into the shadows of the cove, leaving Navarro alone with the envelope, the evidence, and the chilling awareness that everything she thought she knew about the 1994 disappearance had been only a fraction of the truth. The ocean roared, indifferent, relentless, as if swallowing the weight of 30 years of lies, but never quite forgetting. Navarro stood there, heart pounding, knowing that when she returned, the world would change. The cold case was no longer cold, it was alive, and it carried consequences that extended far beyond the cliffs and the waves. The first step toward justice, or vengeance, or something in between, had begun. Navarro drove back through the fog-shrouded roads, the envelope resting on the passenger seat like a sleeping predator. Every turn of the wheel, every glimmer of headlights through mist felt like she was being watched. The weight of Lauren's presence lingered in the car, though the woman herself had vanished into the cliffs like a ghost. Back at headquarters, Navarro spread out the photographs, the notes, the maps. Each item was a thread in a tapestry of corruption, secrecy, and survival that no one had dared to fully unravel before. She traced the coastline on the map with her finger, noting abandoned warehouses, remote coves, shuttered motels, and forgotten parking lots. Every location was tied to Cole and Holt, every disappearance linked through time, every clue hinting at a system designed to bury secrets in plain sight. Navarro realized the scale of what she faced. It wasn't just one cold case. It was a network of cold cases, some solved only in whispers, some never even acknowledged. And at the center of it was Cole, a man who had worn the badge with quiet menace and meticulous control, and Lauren, who had survived his reach through patience, cunning, and sheer will. Late that night, Navarro examined a photograph of a warehouse near Monterey. In the corner of the image, partially obscured by shadows, she spotted a figure crouched near a chain-link fence. The posture, the tilt of the head, unmistakable. It was Lauren, alive, always one step ahead. She had been watching the investigation unfold all these years, cataloging, documenting, ensuring that if anyone came close to the truth, she could control the narrative. Navarro's phone buzzed. An unknown number, she answered cautiously. Detective Navarro, a voice whispered, calm, deliberate. You're closer than you know. But if you keep digging, the tide won't be the only thing turning red. The line went dead. Navarro felt a chill, not from fear, but from recognition. This was no random threat. It was a warning. Lauren was still orchestrating events from somewhere unseen. And Cole had always been the instrument, the decoy, the red herring. Navarro pored over the documents again, cross-referencing names, dates, and locations. One detail stood out, a small marina in Half Moon Bay, where a boat had been registered in 1995 under an alias Lauren had used. The boat had disappeared, abandoned in 1998, and the records were incomplete. It was as if the sea had swallowed her again. Navarro knew she had to follow the trail, to the docks, to the abandoned vessel, to whatever Lauren had left behind. Early the next morning, she drove to the marina. The place was silent, except for the lapping of water against rotting wood. She walked along the dock, noting the remnants of piers, old ropes, and waterlogged planks. There, half submerged in the mud, she found a rusted metal box with a faded label. Property of LP. Her hands trembled as she pried it open. Inside were stacks of photographs, notebooks, and a cassette tape labeled simply, "The Truth." Back at the lab, Navarro played the tape. Lauren's voice filled the room, calm, precise, measured. She described each disappearance, each cover-up, each manipulation orchestrated by Cole and Holt. But she also described herself, her flight, her survival, her decision to vanish, to watch, to document. It was a confession, a manifesto, a guidebook on how to survive a system designed to erase you. The more Navarro listened, the more she realized the enormity of what Lauren had done. Not only had she escaped, but she had also constructed a network of evidence and messages to ensure that the truth would be known when the time was right. The recording ended abruptly. A single sentence lingered in the room, resonating like a warning. "If you expose them, you take my place in the shadows." Navarro understood immediately. This wasn't just an investigation anymore. It was a transfer of responsibility. Someone had to carry the story forward, and by finding Lauren, she had become the custodian of decades of secrets, danger, and unresolved justice. That night, Navarro couldn't sleep. Images of Lauren crouched in shadows, of Cole watching from the sidelines, of the ocean swallowing bones and evidence replayed in her mind. Each wave crashing against the cliff sounded like a heartbeat counting down the time until the next revelation. The next morning, Navarro returned to the lighthouse one last time. She stood at the top, looking out at the horizon, imagining Lauren out there, somewhere, always watching, always recording, always safe. The wind whipped against her face, carrying the scent of salt and the echo of footsteps that might have been real or imagined. Navarro realized the cold case wasn't just solved because Cole was caught. It was solved because Lauren had survived, documented, and controlled the truth herself. And in that realization, Navarro understood that closure was complicated, a mix of revelation and continued uncertainty, justice and survival, truth and myth. The case file, once cold, was now alive, vibrant, dangerous. And it was up to her to tell the story, carefully, fully, without erasing a single nuance of the lives involved, the mysteries unsolved, the truths hidden in plain sight for decades. The ocean continued its eternal roar below, indifferent, relentless, yet somehow echoing with Lauren's resilience. Navarro knew the investigation would never truly end, not until every secret was revealed, every shadow confronted, and every piece of the past had its reckoning. But for the first time in 30 years, a measure of understanding had arrived, fragile, haunting, but real. And somewhere in the fog, Lauren's presence lingered, a reminder that survival, cunning, and patience could outlast even the most meticulous schemes, that the ocean may hide the body, but it could never hide the story. The following week, Navarro traced the coordinates from Lauren's notebook to a small, decrepit warehouse near Moss Landing. The building had been abandoned for decades, its corrugated metal walls rusted, windows broken, the roof sagging. Yet inside, the faint scent of oil and damp wood hinted at recent use. She entered cautiously, flashlight cutting through the darkness. Dust motes floated like tiny specters in the beam. Every step echoed, and Navarro's mind replayed Lauren's warnings. The tide isn't the only thing turning red. On the floor, partially obscured by a tangle of ropes and broken pallets, she found footprints. Recent, wide, deliberate. They led to the center of the warehouse, where a low platform held remnants of what had once been a makeshift living space. A tattered mattress, empty food containers, a journal covered in salt-stained dust. Navarro picked up the journal. The handwriting matched Lauren's. The entries detailed her months in hiding, the careful surveillance of Cole, and the meticulous planning to document every corruption, every disappearance, every cover-up. She wrote about leaving evidence in plain sight while keeping herself safe, a shadow among shadows. One passage stood out. "They think I'm gone. They think the case is cold. But I've been alive, watching, noting, recording. Every whisper, every lie, every cover-up is cataloged. One day the truth will be mine to release, and it will shake them to the core." Navarro shivered. Lauren had anticipated every twist, every investigation, every chance someone might stumble onto the truth. She had been alive, orchestrating her own narrative for 30 years. Navarro searched the rest of the warehouse. In a rusted metal cabinet, she found files, photographs, and another cassette tape. This one, labeled Cole's Secrets, contained recordings of Cole speaking to other officers in hushed tones, discussing missing evidence, falsified reports, and strategies to cover tracks. His voice was calm, manipulative, commanding. Navarro realized the magnitude. Cole had built a network of silence, carefully controlling the narrative, but Lauren had been playing the long game, collecting proof, documenting every betrayal. Navarro took the evidence back to headquarters. She reviewed it obsessively, cross-referencing every detail with past cold cases. Names, dates, locations, all connected. Every disappearance tied to Cole and Holt, every cover-up confirmed. Yet even with proof, the puzzle wasn't complete. Lauren's survival meant there were still pieces missing, threads she had chosen not to disclose yet. Later that evening, Navarro received another anonymous message, a text. "Stop digging or you will join the missing." It was a threat, unmistakable, but she refused to be intimidated. Instead, she focused on the evidence, tracing connections, documenting timelines, preparing for the public revelation that would expose decades of corruption. The next day, she visited Cole in his cell. He sat calmly, hands folded, eyes distant. Navarro laid out the photographs, files, and recordings. "You can't hide anymore," she said. "Everything is documented." Cole's lips curved slightly, a smile devoid of warmth. "Documentation doesn't always mean truth," he said. "It only tells what someone wants to see." Navarro leaned forward. "Lauren documented everything. You can't escape it." He laughed softly, low and chilling. But I never had to. She's been the one in control all along." The words struck Navarro like a blow. She realized that Cole, the man everyone had feared, had never truly held the power. Lauren had. She had survived, adapted, and manipulated the investigation from the shadows, ensuring that when the time came, she could reveal the truth on her own terms. Navarro left the prison with a heavy heart, the weight of Lauren's strategy pressing down on her. The cold case, once thought solved with Cole's arrest, had transformed into something larger, more complex. It was no longer just about a disappearance. It was about survival, power, and the meticulous control of narrative over decades. She reviewed the maps and photographs again, noting patterns, hidden messages, and subtle clues Lauren had embedded in her escape. Every step Lauren had taken was calculated, every location deliberate. Navarro understood the genius of it. Lauren had turned herself into both witness and enigma, ensuring that the truth could not be fully uncovered until she chose to reveal it. That night, as the waves pounded the coast, Navarro thought of the cliffs where Lauren had first disappeared. The ocean had held her secrets for 30 years, yet Lauren had outsmarted even time itself. She had remained untouchable, a ghost walking in daylight, unseen, always watching. Navarro realized that the investigation was far from over. Lauren's story was still unfolding, and she, too, was now a part of it. A custodian of a truth so carefully preserved that it had survived decades of corruption, manipulation, and deception. The case was alive, and the tide, relentless and indifferent, continued to turn. Navarro spent the following days reconstructing timelines, comparing statements, reviewing photographs, and listening to the tapes over and over. Each repetition revealed nuances, subtle shifts in tone, pauses that hinted at hidden truths. Lauren's voice, calm and deliberate, carried decades of planning, fear, and cunning. The more Navarro listened, the more she understood that Lauren had not merely survived. She had orchestrated a life entirely outside the reach of Cole and Holt, documenting their every move without their knowledge. One evening, a package arrived at Navarro's office, unmarked, no return address. Inside was a leather-bound notebook, heavier than she expected. The cover bore no name, only the initials LP. She opened it carefully. The first page contained a map of California, with dots and lines connecting small towns, marinas, abandoned warehouses, and cliffside homes. Each location corresponded to a cold case from the 1990s. Every dot a potential lead, every line a trail of secrets. Tucked between pages were photographs, some labeled, some not. One image froze her heart. Lauren, crouched near the cliffside where she had vanished 30 years prior, watching, recording, smiling faintly at the camera as if she had known Navarro would one day hold these pages. Another photo showed Cole, younger, standing with Holt near an evidence locker, their faces serious, calculating. Navarro traced her finger along the map, realizing that Lauren had connected the dots decades before, ensuring that anyone who pursued the case would uncover not just one crime but an entire network of deception, manipulation, and cover-ups. Navarro knew then that the cold case was no longer just about Cole's arrest. It was about Lauren controlling the narrative, forcing the truth into the light while keeping herself protected. That night, Navarro returned to the lighthouse. She stood at the top, looking out at the waves crashing against jagged rocks, imagining Lauren's path, hiding, observing, documenting, surviving. The wind whipped her hair, and for a brief moment, she thought she saw a shadow move along the cliffs below. A figure watching, always watching. The next morning, she received another message, this time on her secure police email. A single sentence typed without punctuation. Follow the sound where silence speaks. Navarro didn't recognize the IP address, but the handwriting, subtle in syntax and rhythm, matched the voice on the tapes. Lauren was guiding her, still, decades later. Navarro began to cross-reference locations, incidents, and files. Each clue led to another, a building scheduled for demolition in Monterey, a storage unit in Salinas, a warehouse in Oakland. Everywhere Lauren had been, she had left breadcrumbs, ensuring that those who searched diligently could reconstruct the truth. Navarro realized she was no longer just investigating a cold case. She was following a life meticulously documented, controlled, and curated by the person at its center. The thought unsettled her. That afternoon, she received a call from the state forensics lab. A fiber from one of the warehouse photographs had matched another cold case, one previously unconnected, a missing journalist in Los Angeles from 1992. The similarity in methods, timing, and locations was undeniable. Navarro felt a chill. Lauren's survival was intertwined with dozens of cases, each one revealing the depth of Cole's manipulation and Holt's complicity, and the brilliance of Lauren's evasion. She packed her materials and drove south, retracing Lauren's possible paths, visiting small towns, abandoned marinas, and derelict warehouses. At every location she found evidence, small, subtle, almost invisible, a folded note, a hidden photograph, a discarded notebook page. Each item whispered fragments of a story, a puzzle gradually taking shape. At dusk, Navarro found herself on a cliff near Big Sur. The ocean stretched endlessly, silver beneath the fading light. There, among the rocks, she discovered a small, waterproof box partially buried in sand. Inside was a single cassette labeled The Witness. Back at the station, she played it. Lauren's voice filled the room, calm, precise, narrating events with clarity, emotion, and purpose. She spoke of fear, betrayal, survival, and cunning, detailing every manipulation, every cover-up, and every escape. Navarro realized the recordings weren't just confessions, they were instructions, a blueprint for understanding the system Lauren had navigated and survived. As the tape ended, a final line lingered in the room. Those who seek the truth must be ready to become its shadow. Navarro understood. To fully grasp the case, to honor the work Lauren had done, she herself would have to step into the shadows, to think, observe, and act with the patience, cunning, and vigilance that had kept Lauren alive for decades. The cold case was no longer cold. It was alive, evolving, and breathing through the footprints Lauren had left, the messages she had encoded, and the evidence she had painstakingly preserved. And somewhere out there, Lauren remained, watching, guiding, untouchable, a ghost in the relentless California wind. Navarro sat in silence, the ocean's roar below, knowing that the story was far from over. The investigation had transformed into a high-stakes game of endurance, intellect, and perception, and she had just stepped into the middle of it. Navarro spent the next days piecing together Lauren's trail, following coordinates, examining photographs, cross-referencing dates and locations with cold cases she'd long thought closed. Each clue was precise, deliberate, as if Lauren had anticipated every move Navarro might make decades later. The wind off the Pacific carried the smell of salt and something else, the lingering sense of someone unseen, always watching. Navarro drove to an abandoned motel near Half Moon Bay, one of the locations marked in Lauren's notebook. The building had long since decayed, windows boarded, paint peeling, but the footprints in the dust were fresh, sharp, deliberate. She followed them cautiously, flashlight sweeping the interior. On the ground, partially hidden beneath floorboards, she discovered another metal box. Inside were letters and photographs, Lauren's observations on Cole and Holt, recordings of their conversations, and maps detailing escape routes, surveillance positions, and safe houses she had used while hiding. Navarro felt the weight of 30 years of meticulous planning. Lauren hadn't just survived, she had orchestrated an intricate network, documenting every detail, every misstep, every corruption. She had remained untouchable, manipulating events without ever being seen. Navarro's eyes traced one photograph after another. Lauren observing, recording, sometimes smiling faintly at the camera, always vigilant, always calculating. Each photo was a fragment of a story too precise, too controlled to be accidental. Navarro pieced together timelines, routes, and patterns, realizing that Cole and Holt had been only two players in a larger game. Lauren's intelligence, foresight, and patience had outlasted their influence, their authority, and their threats. That evening, back at the station, Navarro received a package, an envelope with no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper, folded several times, bore one line: "The sea remembers all it touches." Navarro recognized the handwriting immediately. Lauren was still orchestrating the flow of information, guiding her through the puzzle. She realized that every location, every photograph, every tape was not only documentation but also instruction, leading Navarro to understand the breadth of Cole and Holt's corruption and Lauren's survival strategy. She reviewed the warehouse photographs and tapes, comparing them to the newly discovered documents. A pattern emerged. Lauren had systematically recorded every interaction, every conversation, every instance of manipulation by Cole and Holt. She had anticipated that someone would eventually revisit the cold cases, and she had prepared for that moment, encoding her guidance in subtle ways that would only make sense to someone determined enough to follow. Navarro realized she herself had become part of Lauren's design, a proxy in her careful choreography of truth and revelation. The thought unsettled her, but also galvanized her. She followed the next coordinate, a secluded cove near Monterey, accessible only at low tide. The waves crashed against jagged rocks, spraying mist into the fog-laden air. Navarro noticed a small, half-buried container in the sand, inside a notebook and a small recorder. Lauren's handwriting, precise and deliberate, chronicling the steps she had taken to evade detection and to document evidence against Cole and Holt. Navarro felt a chill as she read. Trust is a currency only those who understand value can spend. The unaware perish in their ignorance. The realization hit her. Lauren had survived not by chance, but by mastering observation, patience, and the manipulation of expectation. Navarro began plotting the connections between cold cases, photographs, tapes, and letters. Each intersection revealed a layer of deception, evidence of crimes obscured, misfiled, or intentionally erased. Lauren had constructed a web so intricate that only someone with dedication, intelligence, and persistence could begin to reconstruct it. She understood that Cole's arrest had been only one part of a much larger picture, and the revelation of Lauren's survival was a seismic shift in everything she thought she knew about the case. Navarro continued following Lauren's trail, aware that every step was part of an elaborate design. The ocean roared endlessly, indifferent to decades of human deception, while Navarro, guided by Lauren's meticulous records, began unraveling a network of secrets hidden in plain sight for 30 years. Somewhere beyond the fog, Lauren watched, recorded, waited, and ensured that the truth, finally, could not be entirely silenced. Navarro knew the path forward would be perilous, that exposing decades of corruption could bring danger not just to herself but to everyone connected. Yet she pressed on, understanding that the cold case was no longer simply about closure. It was about survival, revelation, and the meticulous power of someone who had vanished but remained ever present, always ahead, always unseen. The ocean spray stung her eyes, the cliffs echoed with the past, and Navarro pressed forward, ready to confront a truth decades in the making, guided by a shadow who had refused to be buried. Navarro's nights became restless, filled with dreams of cliffs, ocean waves, and shadows moving just beyond sight. Every lead, every photograph, every note from Lauren seemed to pulse with life, a reminder that the case had never truly ended. She returned to the files on Cole and Holt, tracing every misstep, every missing report, every falsified signature. A pattern emerged: small towns, abandoned properties, coastal roads, and industrial sites, all places where evidence had been buried, concealed, or overlooked. Lauren's meticulous planning had left a trail that only someone with patience, intelligence, and persistence could follow. One evening, Navarro received an email with no sender, subject line, "Do you see what I see?" Attached were several photographs: a warehouse near Moss Landing, a storage facility in Oakland, and a cliffside cave along the Big Sur coastline. In each, a figure could be glimpsed, partially obscured by shadow, always watching, always vigilant. The handwriting on the images matched Lauren's style from the previous notebook entries. Navarro realized with a jolt that Lauren had been guiding her every step, orchestrating the uncovering of the network, ensuring that the truth would emerge, but only in the precise order she intended. The next day, Navarro returned to the Moss Landing warehouse. The footprints she had noticed before had shifted. New marks in the dust, faint but unmistakable. Someone had been there recently. She followed them cautiously, flashlight cutting through the gloom. At the center of the warehouse, she discovered another cache, a metal box, locked, but light enough to carry. Inside were journals, photographs, and an old cassette tape labeled The Confession. Back at the station, Navarro played the tape. Lauren's voice, calm, measured, detailed Cole's maneuvers, Holt's complicity, and the careful manipulation of evidence. She described her own escape, the strategy that kept her alive, and the way she had observed every move from the shadows. Navarro understood that Lauren had been both observer and participant, shaping the narrative for decades. One passage chilled her. "They think the past is buried, that the evidence is gone, but the past watches, waits, and remembers. And so do I. Navarro realized that exposing Cole's arrest was only the beginning. The network Lauren had documented included multiple cold cases, some unresolved, some hidden in plain sight. To fully understand the story, Navarro would have to trace each thread, confront every lie, and navigate the dangers left in Lauren's wake. That night, as she reviewed photographs, Navarro noticed something she had missed before: a small, nondescript van in the distance of one image, parked near the cliffside cave. Its license plate was partially visible. She ran it through the database and found a registered owner, a name she didn't recognize. But cross-referencing led her to a series of old police reports, all connected to missing persons and abandoned properties. The van, she realized, had been used to transport evidence, victims, and perhaps even Lauren herself during her escape. It was a breadcrumb, placed carefully, meant for someone meticulous enough to follow. Navarro followed the lead to a decrepit dock on the outskirts of Monterey Bay. The fog rolled in thick, damp, masking her approach. She saw the van, abandoned but intact, keys still in the ignition. Inside, she found a briefcase containing photographs, letters, and maps, each marked with dates and locations spanning decades. Lauren had cataloged every encounter, every surveillance, every step of her survival. The realization hit Navarro with force. Lauren had not only survived, but she had also ensured that anyone pursuing the truth could reconstruct the narrative, if they were careful, observant, and patient enough to follow the trail. Navarro's phone vibrated. A text message. "You are close. Do not lose sight of the tide." She looked out at the ocean, waves crashing violently, spray stinging her eyes. Lauren's voice, her handwriting, her presence, all seemed to emanate from the mist, guiding her, warning her, challenging her. Navarro understood that the cold case was no longer simply about closure or justice. It had become a test of endurance, intelligence, and courage, a meticulous, decades-long chess game orchestrated by someone who had refused to be buried, someone who had controlled every step of the investigation without ever being seen. And in that knowledge, Navarro felt both exhilaration and dread. She was in the middle of the story, living the suspense, navigating the shadows, and following a trail laid decades before by a woman who had survived, observed, and waited for the right moment to reveal the truth. The tide rolled in relentlessly, indifferent to human machinations, yet somehow carrying with it the weight of secrets, lies, and survival. Navarro knew that every step she took from that point forward would bring her closer to answers and to danger, guided by the careful, unyielding presence of Lauren Pierce. Navarro couldn't sleep that night. The photographs, the tapes, the notes, each piece pulsed with a life of its own, whispering secrets and warnings across decades. Lauren had left instructions, but they were never direct, always subtle, a puzzle woven into shadows and coded gestures. Navarro's phone buzzed again, another message, simple, stark. "The last step waits where the cliffs meet the tide." She recognized the handwriting immediately. Lauren was guiding her toward the final revelation. At dawn, Navarro drove north along the rugged coastline, wind whipping her hair, waves crashing like drums of warning. She parked near a secluded cliff path, one of the locations Lauren had marked in her notebooks and photographs. The path was treacherous, rocks slick with morning mist. Each step was calculated, careful, as if the ground itself might betray her. At the edge, she found a hollow beneath jagged rocks. Inside, partially concealed by debris and sand, lay a waterproof case. Heart-pounding, she opened it. Inside was a stack of photographs, letters, and a small cassette recorder, all meticulously cataloged. The photographs depicted moments Navarro had seen before. Lauren observing, documenting, surviving, but interspersed were images she had never encountered. Empty streets, shadows moving, the footprints of someone watching, guiding, orchestrating events from the darkness. She played the tape. Lauren's voice filled the air, calm, deliberate, echoing off the cliffs. "This is the truth. Cole controlled the badge, Holt controlled the shadows, but I controlled the evidence. Every disappearance, every misstep, every manipulation has been documented, and now you are part of the story. What you do with this information will decide whose shadow you walk in." Navarro realized the magnitude of what Lauren had left behind. This wasn't just documentation, it was a blueprint of survival, corruption, and control. Lauren had created a web so intricate that even Cole, the man who had once wielded power and fear, could not dismantle it. Every step Navarro took from that point on would be under scrutiny, every decision influenced by Lauren's careful orchestration. The final letter in the case detailed a promise Lauren had made to herself: to vanish, to survive, to document, and to control the truth until the moment she chose to reveal it. Navarro understood that moment had come, but only partially. Lauren remained elusive, unseen, a ghost in the wind, yet omnipresent in every clue, every message, every step Navarro had taken. As the ocean roared below, Navarro mapped the connections. Cold cases reopened, evidence recovered, patterns recognized. She realized that the public believed Cole's arrest had closed the chapter, but the real story had been Lauren's all along. Her survival, her documentation, and her guidance had ensured that truth could never be fully silenced. The tide washed against the rocks, relentless, indifferent, carrying the echoes of decades of secrets, of manipulation, of life and death carefully orchestrated from the shadows. Navarro understood that the investigation had transformed. It was no longer about capturing a suspect or closing a file. It was about understanding the meticulous genius of a woman who had outlasted, outsmarted, and outlived the system meant to destroy her. And in that realization, Navarro felt the weight of responsibility pressing down. The responsibility to follow Lauren's guidance, to expose the network of corruption, and to honor the decades of survival, cunning, and documentation that had made the cold case more than just a story. It was a testament to endurance, intelligence, and control. The wind lifted her hair, the ocean spray stung, and Navarro stared into the horizon, aware that every wave, every shadow, every whisper of wind carried the presence of Lauren Pierce. The cold case was alive, breathing, shifting, and it would remain that way until every secret was revealed, every lie confronted, and every truth fully exposed. Navarro had stepped into the story, into the shadows, into the intricate design Lauren had crafted over 30 years, and she knew there was no turning back. Navarro returned to headquarters with the envelope, the photographs, the notebooks, and the tapes spread across the table like pieces of a puzzle that had been decades in the making. Every artifact pulsed with the weight of time, survival, and calculation. Cole's arrest had closed one chapter, but the story Lauren had orchestrated was far from over. She replayed the tapes again, hearing Lauren's calm, precise voice recounting events from 30 years prior, revealing layers of manipulation, evasion, and survival that no one had suspected. Each recording was a guide, each note a breadcrumb, leading Navarro through a labyrinth of evidence that had been hidden in plain sight. Navarro studied the last photograph Lauren had sent, taken from a distance, showing a figure crouched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. The posture, the angle, the light, unmistakable. Lauren had been observing the coast for years, documenting her own survival while guiding those who sought the truth. The notebook described safe houses, secret storage, coded messages, and detailed the movements of Cole and Holt, mapping decades of corruption with precision. Navarro realized that she was now part of Lauren's design, a custodian of a narrative constructed to expose the hidden network, to reveal the carefully buried crimes without endangering Lauren herself. Each cold case tied to Cole and Holt became clearer. Missing persons, abandoned evidence, falsified reports, all had been meticulously documented, allowing Navarro to reconstruct a timeline, a web of manipulation and control that had evaded authorities for decades. Yet despite all the evidence, the true depth of Lauren's survival, her cunning, and her orchestration remained almost mythical. Navarro understood that Lauren had been both observer and participant, simultaneously controlling events and ensuring her own safety. The ocean's roar outside the building seemed to echo the tension, relentless and indifferent. Every wave was a reminder of secrets hidden, truths buried, and lives altered in silence. Navarro prepared a detailed report, consolidating the evidence, photographs, and recordings, ensuring that every connection, every pattern, every subtle clue Lauren had left would be preserved and understood. The magnitude of it was staggering. The cold case was no longer just about Cole's arrest or even Lauren's disappearance. It was a chronicle of survival, manipulation, and endurance spanning decades. As night fell, Navarro stared at the horizon, thinking of Lauren somewhere beyond the cliffs, watching, documenting, guiding. The realization settled in. Lauren had turned the investigation itself into a game, ensuring that only someone meticulous, observant, and patient could follow, understand, and complete the story. Navarro understood that exposing the network, revealing the corruption, and bringing clarity to the decades of unresolved cases would come with consequences, risks, and challenges, but the responsibility now lay in her hands. The tapes, photographs, and notebooks were not just evidence. They were Lauren's legacy, a masterclass in survival, patience, and intelligence. The wind whipped through the city streets as Navarro prepared to release the compiled evidence, understanding the power it contained, the truths it revealed, and the shadows it would illuminate. Cole had been caught, but the true architect of the story, Lauren Pierce, had remained untouchable, guiding the narrative from the shadows, her presence felt but rarely seen. Navarro knew the investigation would never truly end, not as long as Lauren's influence persisted, not as long as the echoes of her survival continued to shape the uncovering of hidden truths. The cold case was no longer frozen in time. It was alive, vibrant, and relentless, a testament to Lauren's ingenuity and endurance. Navarro looked one last time at the ocean, the waves crashing against the cliffs like the heartbeat of a story decades in the making. She understood the full gravity of what had been uncovered. A story of corruption, survival, and meticulous orchestration that had spanned 30 years, leaving a legacy that would resonate for generations. Lauren had survived, controlled, and guided. Navarro had witnessed it, documented it, and now carried it forward. The ocean kept its secrets, the cliffs held their shadows, but the truth, Lauren's truth, would endure. The cold case had finally transformed from mystery to narrative, from silence to revelation, and in that transformation lay both the power and the peril of knowing what had been hidden for so long. And somewhere beyond the horizon, Lauren watched, still unseen, still untouchable, a ghost who had mastered the art of survival, control, and the unrelenting passage of time. Months had passed since Navarro had traced Lauren's trail along the cliffs, through abandoned warehouses, and into the hidden cove where the final tapes and notebooks had revealed decades of deception. The world outside had moved on, blissfully unaware that a truth so meticulously buried was now laid bare in the hands of one determined detective. Navarro sat alone in her apartment late at night, reviewing the photographs once more. The shadows of Lauren's presence seemed to linger on every page, every creased corner, every margin note in her precise, deliberate handwriting. She realized that Lauren had been a master of control, turning fear and vulnerability into strategy, transforming survival into orchestration, making herself simultaneously invisible and omnipresent. Each photograph told a story of observation. Lauren crouched behind crates, peering through windows, moving along fog-shrouded streets, always recording, always documenting, her eyes calculating every risk, every movement, every human flaw she might exploit to survive. Navarro's mind raced as she mapped each cold case to its location, cross-referencing timelines and witness statements, noticing connections previously invisible. Cole and Holt had been only instruments in a larger design, actors in a drama authored by Lauren herself. But the final piece was still missing. The sense of why she had chosen to surface now, after decades in the shadows. Then came another message. No envelope, no email, no note. Only a call from a number traced to an unregistered VoIP line. The voice was calm, familiar, deliberate. Detective Navarro, some truths are not meant to be fully revealed. Others are meant to be carried. Navarro's pulse quickened. It was Lauren. She had orchestrated everything from afar, guiding Navarro, testing her persistence, shaping the uncovering of her story with precision. Why now? Navarro asked, though she knew the voice wouldn't reveal more than it intended. Because the time has come, Lauren replied. To ensure the story survives, someone must bear it forward. The line went dead, leaving Navarro in silence, the distant roar of the ocean echoing through the night. She understood then that she had become part of Lauren's design, a custodian, an executor, a witness to decades of truth hidden behind layers of deception. She returned to the archives one last time, compiling evidence, photographs, notes, and tapes into a single dossier. Each file represented years of observation, survival, and cunning, the invisible hand of Lauren guiding every step. Navarro realized the enormity of responsibility. The world believed the cold case ended with Cole's arrest. But the truth, layered, complex, and alive, required careful handling. One misstep could undo years of meticulous preservation, could endanger those still connected, and could allow shadows to reclaim their hold over the narrative. Weeks later, Navarro visited the cliffs at Point Reyes, where Lauren had first disappeared. The wind whipped violently, the waves below crashing with relentless fury. She imagined Lauren somewhere out there, watching, unseen, alive, and uncatchable. Every footprint in the sand, every shadow in the fog, every whisper of the wind seemed like a message, a reminder that Lauren's mastery of disappearance and control had not been broken, only deferred. Navarro felt the weight of decades pressing against her, the stories of those lost, the manipulation of authority, the survival of a woman who had outwitted men who thought themselves untouchable. And she understood that the cold case was no longer merely a historical investigation. It was a living narrative, one that would continue to evolve, guided by Lauren's hand, interpreted through Navarro's diligence, and felt in the hearts of all who had waited decades for truth. The ocean roared below, indifferent, relentless, carrying secrets and shadows alike, and Navarro, standing on the edge, realized the final lesson Lauren had left for her. Survival requires patience, intelligence, and control. But the truth, once awakened, becomes a force beyond anyone's dominion. And somewhere beyond the horizon, Lauren remained, unseen, untouchable, a master of her own story, a ghost shaping the world in subtle, profound ways, leaving Navarro and the evidence to carry forward the legacy of survival, observation, and revelation that had begun 30 years ago. The days following Navarro's compilation of Lauren's evidence blurred into a tense rhythm of observation, cross-referencing, and careful communication with select authorities. The public remained unaware of the full scope, only receiving filtered reports about Cole's arrest and the closure of decades-old cold cases. Navarro knew the danger of exposure, that the truth Lauren had preserved was volatile, capable of shaking reputations, dismantling careers, and unsettling communities long convinced of closure. She reviewed the final tapes, the photographs, the letters, each one revealing a layer of manipulation, endurance, and control that spanned 30 years. Lauren had not only survived but had orchestrated a network of observations so precise that even Cole and Holt had been unable to fully comprehend it. Every movement, every omission, every hidden message had been calculated, ensuring that the truth would emerge only in a manner Lauren deemed safe. Navarro began reaching out quietly, cautiously, to journalists and historians she trusted, sharing fragments, ensuring that the evidence would be preserved, contextualized, and interpreted without sensationalism. Yet even as she did, she felt Lauren's presence, an unseen guidance in the shadows, subtle but unmistakable. Messages appeared occasionally, small, cryptic. Photographs left at safe locations, coordinates scribbled on scraps of paper, audio clips labeled only with dates and initials. Lauren's system had anticipated every contingency, every surveillance, every possible leak. Navarro realized that the woman who had vanished 30 years ago had become both architect and guardian of the narrative. The more Navarro pieced together, the clearer it became. The cold case had never been about Cole alone. It had been about the intricate web of corruption, manipulation, and survival, and Lauren had been its invisible constant. Authorities began reopening related cases quietly, using Navarro's compiled evidence to connect dots that had long been ignored. Missing persons reports were revisited, witness statements re-examined, and archives combed for overlooked files. Each confirmation strengthened Navarro's understanding of the scope. A sprawling network of corruption and careful concealment, unraveling only because Lauren had survived to guide its exposure. Late one night, Navarro received another message, this time more direct. "You carry the shadow now. Guard it." She understood the gravity. She was now a custodian of Lauren's legacy, responsible not only for the evidence but for maintaining the integrity of the narrative, ensuring that the truth was neither lost nor distorted. The cliffs along the Pacific, the abandoned warehouses, the hidden cove, all became symbols, markers of survival, endurance, and meticulous orchestration. Navarro realized that Lauren's influence extended far beyond her disappearance. She had constructed a blueprint of secrecy, evasion, and guidance, leaving Navarro as the intermediary between past and present. As the sun rose over the fog-laden coastline, Navarro stood on the cliffs, scanning the horizon. The waves crashed relentlessly, indifferent to human machinations, yet somehow echoing with Lauren's presence, her shadow moving through time and space, unseen but profoundly felt. Navarro felt both awe and apprehension. She understood that the story she carried was powerful, delicate, and dangerous. It was no longer a cold case, it was a living chronicle, an orchestration of survival, observation, and revelation spanning decades. Somewhere out there, Lauren remained alive, unseen, untouchable, guiding the narrative from beyond sight, a master of control and patience, her story now entrusted to Navarro's hands. And as the tide rolled in, indifferent and eternal, Navarro realized that the truth, once set into motion, could not be contained. It would ripple outward, reshaping understanding, challenging assumptions, and illuminating shadows left by decades of deceit. The cold case was alive, pulsating with the resonance of survival and revelation, and Navarro, standing on the cliffs, understood that the legacy of Lauren Pierce was a force beyond containment, an enduring testament to intelligence, patience, and the unyielding pursuit of truth. Weeks passed, and Navarro's nights became a ritual of quiet obsession. She reviewed each file, each photograph, each tape, letting the details seep into her consciousness, tracing patterns and connecting fragments of decades-long manipulation. Lauren's meticulous records had become her guide, each piece revealing the precise choreography of survival, observation, and concealment. Every cold case, every disappearance, every falsified report now lay within Navarro's hands. a living testament to Lauren's genius and endurance. The public still believed Cole's arrest had resolved the mystery, yet Navarro knew the reality was far more complex. Lauren had orchestrated her survival, her guidance, and her revelation, ensuring that no one could fully understand without following the path she had laid. Navarro retraced Lauren's steps along the coastline, from abandoned warehouses to remote docks, each location a marker, each clue a fragment of the story Lauren had preserved. She noticed details previously overlooked: footprints in dust, subtle alterations in photographs, faint markings in notebooks, all instructions left deliberately to guide a diligent observer. One evening, Navarro received an unmarked package. Inside was a compact camera containing photographs of Navarro herself, taken without her knowledge, at locations she had visited along the coast. The handwriting on a note tucked in the case matched Lauren's precise script: "Observation is its own lesson." Navarro understood immediately. Lauren was still watching, still orchestrating, ensuring the narrative unfolded exactly as she intended. The realization both unsettled and awed her. Lauren had vanished decades ago, yet her presence remained tangible, guiding every step, shaping every revelation, and maintaining control even from the shadows. Navarro reviewed the photographs carefully. Some depicted Cole and Holt, others anonymous figures, and some showed empty streets, abandoned vehicles, and desolate warehouses. Subtle clues to Lauren's hidden movements, her pathways of survival, and her precise methods of documenting events without being seen. Each image resonated with the mastery of a life spent in constant vigilance, a life lived at the intersection of danger, intelligence, and calculation. The ocean below roared endlessly, indifferent, relentless, yet it seemed to echo with Lauren's presence, a reminder of her mastery over absence, concealment, and survival. Navarro realized that the cold case had transformed into something larger, a living, evolving narrative of corruption, manipulation, and endurance. The tapes and notes were no longer simply evidence. They were a blueprint, a guide, and a chronicle of survival across decades. She began compiling a report, documenting every connection, every pattern, and every revelation. Yet even as she prepared it for presentation, she understood that the story could never be fully captured in words or files. Lauren's orchestration had been dynamic, interactive, and ongoing. Each decision Navarro made, each lead she followed, became part of the narrative Lauren had designed. And then, in the quiet hours of dawn, Navarro received a message that sent a shiver down her spine. The tide will turn, but the shadow remains. She recognized the voice not in sound, but in the cadence of the message, the deliberate choice of words, the imprint of Lauren's influence. Somewhere out there, Lauren remained alive, vigilant, and untouchable, a ghost shaping events, guiding the unraveling of truth, and maintaining control over her own story. Navarro understood the full weight of responsibility. She was now the custodian of decades of survival, manipulation, and revelation. Her actions, decisions, and interpretations would determine how the truth emerged, how the cold cases were perceived, and how Lauren's legacy would endure. Standing at the cliff's edge, waves crashing violently below, Navarro realized that the investigation would never truly end. The ocean, indifferent yet eternal, carried secrets, shadows, and echoes of lives manipulated and preserved. Lauren's presence, unseen but omnipresent, ensured that the narrative remained alive, evolving, and meticulously controlled. The cold case, once frozen in time, had become a living chronicle, a testament to the intelligence, patience, and unyielding determination of a woman who had vanished but never ceased to influence events. Navarro exhaled, understanding that her own life, her own role, was now entwined with Lauren's design. The past, the present, and the future converged in a story that would continue to unfold, carried forward by those brave enough to follow the shadows and illuminate the hidden truths Lauren had safeguarded for decades. The wind lifted, carrying the roar of the Pacific and the faintest whisper of presence. And Navarro knew, with clarity and resolve, that some shadows could never be fully caught, some truths could never be entirely silenced, and some masters of disappearance remained eternal, guiding the world from places unseen, untouchable, and profoundly alive. Months had passed since Navarro first began piecing together Lauren's trail, yet the tension never eased. Every lead, every photograph, every note felt alive, pulsing with Lauren's careful orchestration. Navarro had learned to anticipate patterns, to recognize subtle cues, to trust the invisible hand guiding her through decades of hidden truth. The public, meanwhile, remained largely unaware of the full scope. News outlets had reported Cole's arrest, the so-called closure of the 1994 disappearance, and a few minor follow-ups on cold cases quietly reopened. But none had grasped the intricate web Lauren had spun, the network of observation, survival, and control she had maintained for 30 years. Navarro spent long nights reviewing every file, every map, every photograph, the faint hum of the city below a reminder that the world continued in blissful ignorance. Then came the unexpected. An unmarked package delivered to her apartment. Inside, a single Polaroid photograph, edges curling with age, showed a figure at the cliffside where Navarro had first encountered Lauren. The figure crouched, half hidden in shadow, eyes fixed on the horizon. On the back, a single line was written in Lauren's precise script. The story survives in the hands of those who observe. Navarro understood immediately. Lauren was still guiding the narrative, even from a distance, ensuring that each revelation would unfold exactly as she intended. That week, Navarro began organizing the evidence for a broader release. She categorized tapes, photographs, and notebooks, cross-referencing dates, locations, and people, revealing an interconnected map of corruption, manipulation, and survival. She realized that each cold case linked to Cole and Holt was part of a grand design, a chronicle of human error and deliberate concealment, all meticulously documented by Lauren. Late one evening, Navarro visited the cliffs once again. Fog hung low over the waves, masking the jagged rocks below. She stood at the edge, feeling the weight of decades pressing against her, the vastness of the ocean echoing the scope of Lauren's orchestration. The wind carried whispers of past events, the subtle residue of footprints long erased, and the faint scent of salt and secrecy. Navarro reviewed the latest photographs, noticing details she had missed before, the tilt of Lauren's head, the way shadows fell across the landscape, the positioning of objects in the background, all carefully chosen, deliberate, instructive. Lauren had planned for every contingency, every observer, every possible revelation. Navarro realized she had become a participant in a story decades in the making, following Lauren's guidance, tracing her steps, and interpreting her coded instructions. The tide crashed against the cliffs below, relentless, eternal, yet somehow responsive to the unfolding narrative. Navarro knew the next steps would be critical. The evidence, if released too quickly or carelessly, could endanger lives or disrupt communities. She meticulously compiled a report, detailing the timeline, the evidence, the connections, and the orchestrated survival of Lauren Pierce. Each entry was carefully annotated, cross-referenced, and preserved. Then, as dawn broke, Navarro stood on the cliffs, looking out across the silvered ocean. Somewhere out there, Lauren remained alive, unseen, untouchable, guiding the flow of revelation, shaping the narrative, and ensuring that the truth would emerge on her own terms. Navarro felt the enormity of the responsibility. The cold case was no longer frozen in time. It had become a living, breathing chronicle of survival, deception, and revelation. And in that moment, she understood that the story Lauren had orchestrated for decades would continue to unfold, guided by shadows, documented meticulously, and carried forward by those who were perceptive, patient, and vigilant enough to follow. The ocean's roar echoed like a heartbeat, relentless and indifferent, yet resonant with the enduring presence of a woman who had mastered disappearance, observation, and control. Navarro exhaled, knowing that the legacy of the cold case, the revelation of Cole's corruption, and the untouchable brilliance of Lauren Pierce would remain alive, evolving, and profoundly impactful for generations to come. The tide rolled in, unyielding, indifferent, yet somehow carrying with it the imprint of truth, survival, and the shadow of one woman's extraordinary endurance. The months that followed were a careful dance. Navarro moved deliberately, guided by Lauren's invisible hand, ensuring the network of evidence, photographs, and tapes reached only those who could handle the weight of the truth. The media began to notice subtle anomalies, reopened cold cases, recovered evidence, cryptic statements from law enforcement, but the full story remained shrouded. Navarro understood that full disclosure could destabilize communities, ruin lives, and awaken the shadows Lauren had survived for decades. Yet the truth demanded attention. She continued to trace Lauren's path along the coast, revisiting warehouses, docks, abandoned motels, and cliffside caves. Each location told a story, a thread in the intricate tapestry Lauren had woven. Every footprint, every discarded note, every photograph was both evidence and instruction. Navarro felt Lauren's presence in each detail, a ghost guiding her, observing her, ensuring she interpreted the clues with precision. One evening, at the top of a windswept cliff near Big Sur, Navarro paused. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, silvered under the fading sun, waves pounding the rocks with relentless rhythm. She could almost see Lauren in the mist, crouched, silent, watching, calculating. Navarro realized the full scale of what Lauren had accomplished. 30 years in the shadows, documenting corruption, evading capture, controlling the narrative, and ensuring that the truth would surface only when she chose. Cole and Holt had been only pieces in the larger game, instruments of control and manipulation, but Lauren had been the architect, the unseen strategist, the master of survival. Navarro reviewed the final photographs, tapes, and notes once more. Lauren had left a pattern, a blueprint for understanding decades of hidden crime, meticulous observation, and carefully orchestrated revelation. Navarro understood that she now carried the story forward, a custodian of Lauren's legacy. It was her responsibility to preserve, interpret, and protect the narrative, ensuring it was revealed on Lauren's terms. The tide crashed against the cliffs, eternal and indifferent, yet resonant with Lauren's presence, her survival, and her mastery of invisibility. Navarro exhaled, feeling the weight of decades pressing against her, the magnitude of secrets, survival, and revelation converging into one living, breathing chronicle. Somewhere beyond the horizon, Lauren remained, unseen, untouchable, orchestrating the narrative from the shadows, guiding the flow of truth, and ensuring the enduring legacy of her survival and intelligence. Navarro understood that the cold case was no longer just a historical investigation. It was a living narrative, evolving, dynamic, and profoundly complex. The files, the tapes, the photographs, the notes, all were part of a continuum, a shadow story spanning 30 years, and Navarro had become part of it, entrusted with the delicate balance between revelation and discretion. As night fell, the cliffs shrouded in mist and moonlight, Navarro felt a quiet reverence. The story Lauren had created, meticulously curated and preserved, would endure. It would ripple outward, affecting perceptions, challenging assumptions, and illuminating shadows long held secret. The ocean's roar was relentless, yet it carried a rhythm she recognized, the echo of Lauren's endurance, the pulse of survival, the resonance of control. Navarro turned away from the cliff, knowing the story was now hers to bear, to interpret, and to protect. The cold case was alive, vibrant, and unyielding, a testament to the intelligence, patience, and unbreakable will of Lauren Pierce. And somewhere unseen but present, Lauren continued her watch, a ghost in the wind, ensuring that truth, once awakened, could never be fully silenced. The past, present, and future converged in that narrative, eternal and unbroken, leaving Navarro as both witness and participant in a story 30 years in the making, a story that would endure long after the waves had claimed the cliffs, long after shadows had faded, and long after the world believed the mystery had ended. The cold case had transformed, and in its transformation lay the extraordinary, haunting, and unyielding legacy of Lauren Pierce. The days blurred together. Navarro's mind churned with the magnitude of what had been uncovered. Lauren's voice, steady and deliberate, echoed through her thoughts, guiding her as if the woman herself were standing just out of reach. Every step, every word had been part of the larger design, a design that Navarro now had to carry, protect, and, most importantly, ensure was never lost again. The world outside remained unaware, a quiet hum of life continuing while the truth simmered just beneath the surface. News outlets reported on the reopening of cold cases, the rise of new leads, and the occasional breakthrough, but the deeper connections, the intricate web of corruption Lauren had documented, remained concealed. Navarro knew that she couldn't let it remain hidden for long. Every detail Lauren had left behind was a breadcrumb leading to a final reckoning. As the weeks stretched on, Navarro began to feel the weight of responsibility that had been thrust upon her. She had become both witness and keeper of a truth too dangerous to expose recklessly. But even more than that, she had inherited Lauren's meticulous eye, her ability to observe, to wait, to calculate the precise moment to reveal the full picture. The photographs, the tapes, the coded messages, they had all led to this. A quiet revelation, a calculated unfolding. It was time to approach those who could help ensure the story would never fade into obscurity. Navarro reached out to trusted investigative journalists, historians, and legal experts who had worked on cold cases, carefully choosing those who had the integrity to handle the truth without sensationalizing it. Together, they crafted a report detailing every piece of evidence, every connection between the disappeared, Cole's involvement, and the wider network of corruption. But even as they prepared to release the findings, Navarro remained haunted by a question that gnawed at her. Why had Lauren chosen her? It was a question that had followed her since the beginning. Was it because she had the persistence to uncover the truth? Was it simply a matter of luck? Or had Lauren known that Navarro, with her own personal understanding of the hidden corners of human nature, would be the one capable of carrying her story forward? Navarro began to realize that it wasn't just the cold cases that Lauren had left behind. It was the shadow of survival itself. The lessons that came with controlling one's narrative, becoming untouchable in a world that thrives on secrets, and above all, the careful balancing of truth and concealment. A message arrived on Navarro's phone one late afternoon, again from an untraceable source. The tide waits for no one, but there's always a shadow in the storm. It was a final instruction, one that echoed Lauren's early messages. A reminder, the ocean, the cliffs, the hidden locations, they weren't just symbolic. They were a part of the world Lauren had built to protect herself, and in many ways, they were the world that Navarro had now inherited. Days later, a breakthrough came when Navarro received a call from a historian she had contacted earlier in her search. The historian had uncovered something crucial, an old police report from 1991, which had been filed under Holt's name but never officially registered. The document detailed a missing persons case that had been immediately shut down by a higher-up, with no explanation given. The name on the report, a woman named Sarah Dubois, was tied to a cold case from Navarro's own earlier investigations. Navarro connected the dots quickly. Sarah Dubois had been one of many victims, one of many women whose disappearances had been quietly dismissed, buried under layers of misdirection. But Lauren had known. She had known, and she had documented every last detail of it. The truth wasn't just about exposing Cole and Holt's crimes. It was about shining a light on the systemic decay that allowed them to thrive. Sarah Dubois, like so many others, had been part of a cycle, a pattern of erasure that Lauren had carefully unraveled over the years. And now, with each new connection Navarro discovered, the system was beginning to fracture. The ocean roared in the distance as Navarro sat in her office, staring at the photographs, the maps, the collection of Lauren's life and work. The full picture was taking shape, but it was not yet time to reveal it. She understood the balance, timing, patience, and the careful release of information would determine the outcome. Lauren had left this legacy, a strategy for survival, a meticulous plan for the truth to emerge when it could no longer be ignored. And just as Navarro had become a part of it, she also knew that the world would eventually have to confront it. The tide would turn, but it would take time. And just as Lauren had once disappeared, unseen by the world, so too would her story remain, but now it had a voice, a steady, unwavering pulse. And in that, Navarro found the key. The legacy wasn't just about exposing the corruption of a few men. It was about understanding the resilience, the power of survival, and the careful crafting of a life hidden from the world. Navarro had become the bearer of that legacy, and in the shadow of Lauren's intricate design, she stood ready to reveal the truth, piece by piece, until every last fragment of the puzzle was exposed. And even then, the story would never be truly finished. It would simply be passed on to others, carried by those who had the patience to understand, the intelligence to uncover it, and the strength to ensure it was never silenced again. The weeks that followed were a blur of planning, meetings, and quiet tension. Navarro moved through them with purpose, guided by the relentless cadence of the ocean, which had become the symbol of Lauren's enduring presence. Silent, constant, unfathomable. She knew the time for exposing everything was approaching. The world, however, wasn't ready for what she was about to reveal. The scope of the story Lauren had left behind was so vast, so carefully concealed, that it threatened to unravel everything, not just for those involved, but for everyone who had believed in the stability of their world. The cold cases that had been reopened were only the beginning. Navarro had pieced together connections between seemingly unrelated disappearances, all linked by the common thread of deception, manipulation, and a carefully orchestrated network designed to protect those at the center, Cole, Holt, and a few others who had hidden in plain sight for years. The photographs Lauren had left behind painted a picture of control, survival, and observation. Each image captured moments when time itself had been frozen, when the world seemed to exist in a delicate balance between exposure and concealment. Navarro had become part of that narrative, unknowingly stepping into the intricate design Lauren had crafted. The realization weighed on her. She was no longer just a detective in pursuit of justice. She was a guardian of a story that needed to be told, but told carefully, methodically. The files, the tapes, the maps, each piece of evidence was a fragile link in a chain that could break at any moment. As Navarro prepared for the final revelation, she received a message. "The storm is coming. Do not falter." It was a reminder, a warning. Lauren had always been ahead of the game, and now, it seemed, she was reminding Navarro that their work was far from over. The public would soon be aware of the corruption, the manipulation, the network that had operated in the shadows for so long. But the unveiling would be complex. It wasn't just about exposing the wrongdoers. It was about understanding the intricate system that had allowed them to flourish, and the careful balance Lauren had maintained to ensure her survival. Navarro returned to the cliffside where it all began, the place where she had first encountered Lauren. The waves were crashing below, furious, relentless. It felt like the world itself was preparing for something, as if nature itself understood the enormity of the truth that was about to be revealed. She stared out into the horizon, contemplating everything that had led to this moment. She had come so far, but now the true test was before her. The story Lauren had carefully crafted was her inheritance, her burden, and her responsibility. The world would soon know the truth, but it would be a truth shaped by Navarro's decisions, her handling, her choices. As the tide turned, Navarro felt something stir deep within her, a sense of purpose, of clarity. She had learned from Lauren's survival, patience, intelligence, and the quiet strength to endure. Now, it was her turn to carry the torch. When the revelations came, they would come in waves, just like the ocean. At first a ripple, a whisper, something barely noticeable. But over time, the waves would grow, the truth would build, and the consequences would be felt everywhere. She knew the story would continue, long after the last page had been turned, the last tape had been played. The cold cases, the shadowy figures, the manipulation of truth. It would all be part of a larger reckoning. The ocean roared beneath her, indifferent, eternal. But in that sound, she heard something else, Lauren's legacy. The woman who had survived the unthinkable, whose shadow had stretched across decades, whose story had been carefully documented, preserved, and passed on. Now it was Navarro's turn to ensure it was not forgotten. The tide would always turn. The waves would always crash against the cliffs. But the truth, Lauren's truth, would remain unyielding, an unbroken current that would never be fully silenced, no matter how far it had to reach. Navarro stood at the edge, looking out at the endless ocean, feeling the weight of everything that had come before her, knowing the journey was far from over. It had only just begun.